Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 715 of Longbox Heroes, the Lamborghini of comic book podcasts. Joe and Todd here. Todd, hello. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, despite a skunk walking past my air conditioner as we're doing this podcast.
Oh, no.
Yep. I can tell. One just walked by. The 10 o'clock skunk.
Is he walking his usual route? Is he like a patrolman or something?
One person will get that joke, by the way.
Okay.
But I do have a skunk that kind of does that is like on the prowl around here, and he usually comes by around the same time. So,
is he on the prowl for a cat that has a white stripe painted down their back, or what's going on?
Right, and I think there's a frisky skunk is chasing it.
Yes. We do have several no skunks, thankfully, but the skunks typically are like 2 blocks up closer to the cemetery. Mm-hmm. But we have like 2 to 3 bad cats that roam our neighborhood, and they always end up in our backyard.
Right.
And maybe like 2 years ago, during the winter, April made like a little shelter in our backyard for them.
Oh, mistake.
Yeah. I was going to do the Dana Gould mistake, but I would be doing him a disservice as well. And then she lamented that she had to clean up all this cat poop in our backyard.
Ah.
And I said, I wonder how that cat poop got in our backyard. Do you think it was because of the shelter that you left for the cats and the food that you would leave out for them that are not our cats? And I get it. I feel bad. You want those cats to be safe. And we do try to lure them into our house to become our new cats. Mm-hmm. And by we, I mean my wife does.
Right.
And that hasn't happened yet. But I don't need no more goddamn cats in my house.
Right. And I'll say this is the last thing. At the Cinnabon 2 weeks ago, a skunk died in the parking lot. And just like died. It's not like anything happened to it. So we called the... It's not like, like it had
overdosed on undercooked dough, huh? We'll just chalk this up to natural causes.
Natural skunk death, Joe. So one of the guys that had a building next door called the Borough building, and they sent the garbage truck down, and we threw it in the back with a shovel. So I can only imagine that garbage smelled good that day.
Oh, my goodness.
Extra smelly garbage that day, Joe.
The Borough building.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I wrote the Hucklebuck. Me and Frank would mix it up behind the Borough building.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where they keep the donkeys, the Borough building.
Yeah. No. There's a latter-day Jerky Boys call where they harass a guy about who actually wrote the Hucklebuck.
I know that one. I wrote the Hucklebuck. Oh, you didn't?
Yeah, me and Frank did behind the Borough building.
Right.
Yeah. All right, we have a show to do today, huh?
A short show, but go ahead.
Oh, my goodness. All right. So we have follow-ups on a story from a couple weeks ago. We have updates on animated TV shows that are moving up the schedule and whether or not they're going to filter into our purview on the show. Big-name creators leaving big-name books. At least, we'll get into that when we get into that. And, big-name creators calling out other creators for ripping off other people. How about that?
Fair enough.
Enough of a tease there. Got to sweep the quarter hours. The Rob Watch is back. Just a dusting of the Rob this week. He's back from Italy with a vengeance.
Right.
Conventions this weekend. My walk down Lois Lane, where we get our first baby Superman story.
Oh, boy.
What we read this past week, which is Dick Tracy #2 and Outsiders #8. What we're looking forward to coming out this week. I don't think there was any art attacks, but we do, of course, have Todd and Joe Have Issues as we are reading issue 8 of Gail Simone's Secret Six. And in TV talk, batten down the hatches because we've got the latest episodes of Doctor Who, the latest episodes of Star Wars The Acolyte, and we've got the first 3 episodes of season 4 of The Boys.
Woohoo!
We're overflowing with content this week, my friends.
Slopping over with TV.
That's right. So let's start right off from the rip. It was on this very show 9 weeks ago, because I had to go and check, that we first discussed the official announcement, the rumor and innuendo that at San Diego Comic-Con, we were going to get the announcement of Scott Snyder's Absolute Universe at DC Comics.
Right. A new imprint.
Yet another new imprint, something that DC loves to do. And we're like, well, let's see what happens, whatever. And I hand waved it that we'll get to the end of 2024 and we might get a book, but we ain't getting a line. We'll get the official announcement at San Diego. We'll get something that pops up because right now, June, we're getting September books. By the time that San Diego hits, we'll be getting October books. Then November, December is after San Diego. That's when we'll get any sort of announcements officially of solicited, released DC Absolute Universe books. But apparently Diamond has it on their pull sheets that for San Diego there is going to be a exclusive Absolute Ash Can special edition.
Right.
So they are printing up something to be handing out or to give out or to do something with. So they are going to have printed materials to tease who is going to be doing what we're going to get and so forth. We don't know much other than Scott Snyder. And again, a lot of this is all speculation anyway outside of Scott Snyder. Okay.
Right.
People have mentioned that there's a bunch of creators that are finishing up their runs, which we're going to get into here shortly, September and October. I know recently Al Ewing in his newsletter said that he just did his first DC work in their Pride book this month, but then he said that he has something bigger coming toward the end of the year that he can't talk about. So it's just a lot of people speculating of the who's and the what's are going to be in it. But the fact that they're soliciting something that's on the Diamond order sheets, that there's going to be something at San Diego, makes me feel as though I might be eating my John Cena hat at the end of this year.
I don't remember what I said, but I think I was leaning towards they would do something just at the end of the fourth quarter to pump up those numbers. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's kind of where I always think, trying to get that doomsday clock in before the end of the fiscal year. But that's interesting. The only thing that jumps into my mind, though, is I feel like ash cans were a big thing around 30 years ago exactly, Joe.
Right.
So it just seems like everything comes around 30 years later. If there was only a place that we could look at that and see that kind of stuff.
Well, again, they weren't soliciting ash cans in the Diamond previews 30 years ago, but obviously there were certain books that we do know that were released 30 years ago that did have those ash cans and so forth. So
even though I would beg to differ, because in the Marvel previews that we've done,
right.
There was all those Force Works and Iron or whatever the weird, like it's Iron Man, but also this book and Fantastic Four and Force Works. They were putting out a ton of ash cans, and I think Malibu was 1994 was like the year of the ash can, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, I digress.
We'll have to keep an eye out for the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of creators wrapping up their books and so forth, of course, he announced it in his newsletter. I always say, if you have a favorite creator, they have an email newsletter, they have a Substack, they have a something, go find it out. It's probably linked up on whatever social media they're still using. It's worth it to sign up for. Get that email blast from your favorite creator. You'll get something as silly as Ed Brubaker took a picture of his fancy director type chair on the set of Criminal, right?
Yep.
But then you'll actually get important information about your favorite creator and new books and stuff that they have coming out. Or in this case, leaving Joshua Williamson, who at DC currently is doing the Superman book, who is doing Batman and Robin and is doing Green Arrow, just announced today that with the September solicitations, it'll be his last issue of Batman and Robin, and with the October solicitations, it'll be his last issue of Green Arrow.
Right.
So he's sticking with Superman. He does mention in the write-up, just kind of cursory, he says that he's been offered some new projects that were difficult to turn down. I knew I needed to give myself some room to breathe before I decided to take anything new on, clear my plate, take some time, and then tackle this new work. And again, I could see dropping 2 books to pick up one as part of the DC Absolute Ultimate line. I would not be surprised if Joshua Williamson is one of those creators on one of those new books.
I wouldn't doubt it either, because you want to start with some of the bigger names. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I stopped on Batman and Robin, but I've been enjoying Green Arrow, so I'm going to be sad to see him leave that. But we'll see who jumps on, because I'm not. You know, in my olden days now, I'm less likely to give more people a chance like I used to do in the old days, because I've been doing that my whole life now. But we'll see. But I'm going to miss him on those. And if he does do an absolute comic or whatever, I look forward to seeing what it is. So we'll see.
Speaking of DC and speaking of the September solicitations, there is a cover artist, Francesco Mattina, who is doing some variant covers for the big 3, your Supermans, your Batmans, and your so forths, in the September solicitations. And just this week, both Scott Williams, who is Jim Lee's like right-hand man, that's the only person that Jim Lee allows to ink his stuff these days.
Pretty much, yeah.
And Adi Gradinoff both publicly came out saying that this guy is one of the biggest ripoff artists, let alone using AI to do these covers that DC is putting out this week. But mentioning a bunch of work that he did at Marvel that ended up getting him fired from Marvel back in 2019 when they found out that he was just outright swiping from other artists.
Right.
So I'm just reporting what Adri Gadanoff and Scott Williams are saying in regards to this artist. If you go and you search Francesco Mattina, you can see many, many examples of him doing just that, like just reversing the image and maybe adding a little something, removing a little something to an already existing cover or character, not putting a lot of his own anything on it.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this one, like the Superman cover, was really bad, like AI kind of a deal. Like did you see the Superman symbol, how screwed up it was?
Yes.
Like how the S has 2 swoops in the bottom. And like, there's no other way to get, like, you don't accidentally do that. So the way I found out about it was somebody actually brought it up to Gail Simone, because it's her Action Comics cover.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
Yeah, and she was like, no, I didn't, like, this is news to me kind of a deal. And then that was really all she said. So I was like, oh, like, this is going to be big, but we'll see where it goes, because, you know, they keep saying they're going to crack down on this stuff, and it's not hard to see sometimes.
Yeah. And, you know, we talked about this before where there was another big thing. I think it was Adrian Sorrentino with the stuff that they were doing on one of the Chip Zdarsky Batman issues. And he was showing his process on Instagram. And then somebody ran it through one of those things that could test whether or not art is AI or not. And even though it was stuff that he was very clearly shown being penciled, it was coming back as like 80% AI art. Right. So again, it's not always, you know, you're using a computer to verify if this was a computer created thing. Again, this is just early in the solicitation cycles. They're not even fully trickled out online yet. They probably won't be up on Diamond's site until by the end of the week. And there's still plenty of time for those covers to get pulled if that comes to that. Right.
Yep.
So last week we did get some information, and then I see a retraction in regards to some information about some upcoming animated stuff. When Jimmy Pistol, the new co-CEO over at DC Studios, announced what the beginning of his slate of stuff was going to be, one of the things that was on there was an animated Creature Commandos show. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, it was just on the schedule as sometime in 2025.
Right.
This week, we got the official announcement that it will be December of 2024 that'll be available on HBO Max or whatever it's called. Right.
Right. Whatever name it they choose by then, too.
Yeah. So it's a lot of the same voice actors. It's a lot of the same folks that are going to be cast in some of the upcoming stuff. Some of the stuff that had previously been in Jimmy Pistol, DC stuff already, Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, things of that nature as well. Obviously this is something that they have been working on since October of last year, doing all of the animation, voice recording, and so forth. So it'll be very interesting to see this being the first official thing to roll out from Jimmy Pistol, from his corner of the DC universe, and I, for one, am excited for it.
Right, I'm going to watch it as long as my, whatever they call it, Max, at that point hasn't kicked off. Mm-hmm. So we'll see.
Now, another one that came out this week, and then as I was refreshing everything, we have the correction and retractions here. So back in November of 2021, when Marvel was at some sort of thing, whether it was D23 or whether it was South by Southwest or whatever it was, they showed their upcoming slate of animated projects. Mm-hmm. And one of them was Spider-Man the Freshman Years, right? And it was just on the schedule, no date, no nothing, right? So I'm like, oh, they put it on a graphic, they showed it in public, it's getting added to the list. Mm-hmm. So this week, it comes out that they've changed the name of the show from Spider-Man the Freshman Years to Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and even going as far as to say that based on the success of the X-Men 97 series that came out this year, right, that this was getting fast-tracked to come out the first week of November. Then as soon as that got released, the people from Marvel came back and said, no, we didn't say an official date. All we're saying is that we're changing the name of the show. We still don't know when it's coming out.
Right.
But it was one of those things where it was as quickly as the news came out that it was going to be the first week of November, as quickly as it got pulled that we're no, don't go saying that it's the first week of November because, we ain't ready for that yet. But did you end up watching any of X-Men 97?
I did not. It might be soon on my list because I'm always looking for new stuff. I don't watch as much TV that's not show related as much anymore. Especially since they killed a lot of the CW Arrowverses and stuff like that. I watch what we watch for this show, and then I'm just constant reruns of the original Law and Order because I'm an old.
Yeah.
But so I don't know. I want to watch X-Men 97, but I keep putting it off.
I'm aware of Law and Order, but I don't think I've ever watched an episode of Law and Order.
I've seen every episode of the original Law and Order, and anything in the Jerry Orbach years, I'm an aficionado on because my mother really liked Jerry Orbach when she was alive. I used to bust her all the time that Jerry Orbach was her boyfriend, and she used to get really mad. She got only slightly less mad than when I would ask her about her favorite wrestler, who was Joey Abs. But so I just know them all, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
So Spider-Man, is it on the list of things we have to watch?
Nah, it'll be watched at my leisure because it's Spider-Man,
Right.
April and I did start watching X-Men 97, and then life got in the way. I think we watched the first 5 episodes. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
I feel as though everyone has watched it by this point that's going to watch it. We watched it up to the part where the Sentinels attack Genosha when they're having the big fancy ball.
Oh. Did they play AC/DC Big Balls?
They did.
They missed an opportunity there.
I was going to say, I don't think they could have got the rights to it is all.
Marvel had the rights to a lot of their songs, so.
They're not going to put it in a cartoon,
Fair enough.
Ask not for whom the rob trolls. The rob trolls for thee. And now, the Rob Watch.
Well, one of the reasons that the X-Men 93 or 97 cartoon was so successful is because Cable was in it.
Right.
And, the first appearance of Cable in New Mutants 98, some would say Todd. I'm not one of those people. But some would say that New Mutants 98 is the most important book in the last 33 years, hands down. And that it's a proud accomplishment, separated from the pack.
It's a weird number to just throw out there.
Well, listen, you gotta move those goalposts so like you fit into your achievements could fit in there, right?
Right. You can't put it can't go 40 years because then you're bumping up against Crisis on Infinite Earths.
So I think, okay, I could go and I could pull up the previews catalogs from 1991, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're saying 33 years. And I could probably think of, maybe one, maybe two books that might have been more seminal during that time frame, more influential in 1991 than New Mutants number 98. And I'm just looking at the cover,
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously that's, it was early 91 and then X-Force comes out later that year. Just looking at the covers of the previews catalogs to see if there's anything else that jumps out at me during this era. I don't know, maybe does Vertigo Comics become Vertigo Comics in 1991?
I forget. I think it comes out in that year. I forget what. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But see, and I don't often like to take the Rob side, but I'll give him credit where credit's due. But is it an important comic? Yes, because it's the first appearance of Deadpool.
And Cable and and Shatterstar and Gideon.
It wasn't the first appearance of Cable.
Huh?
New Mutants 98 isn't the first appearance of Cable.
No?
It's 86 or 87.
Oh, that's right.
But Deadpool is one of their biggest characters. They milk it. So I'm if you kind of go by that metric, that it's the first appearance of a character that would go on to be a cash cow for the company, I kind of get it. Because can you compare it to Death of Superman? Do you know what I mean? That was a big issue, a big iconic issue, but you only get to do that story once. You know what I mean? You're going to milk a story because it's the same thing over and over again. With at least you could do Deadpool many times, in new stories. But I think there might be other big books if I went through that time, if that makes any sense. I don't know. I see the grain of a point he has, but when he's putting it at 33 years, you can't do it in the last 50 years. Because
he could say 30. He could have said 35 years.
Right, but I feel like there's something in that 35-year range that he can't bump up against, so he's got to put that specific number out,
I'm surprised that he didn't say the last 32 years, 6 months, and 4 weeks. The most important book in that very specific time frame.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, as you get closer, there are other big books. How big is a Walking Dead? Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? That started a whole franchise too.
Yep.
So there's a lot of play there.
But obviously, with this being one of the most important, being the most important book of the last 33 years, the Rob has also stated that he will not be signing these for grading purposes after this upcoming Friday. Quote, gonna let them cool off a few years.
Because they're big steamy piles right now.
Well, a couple things. Mm-hmm. I'll say, the Rob is saying signing them for grading purposes. Mm-hmm. I wonder if I could guarantee to the Rob that I'm not going to get it slabbed or graded, that he would sign my copy of New Mutants 98.
Right, but if you're getting it graded, they have to witness it.
Right. So if I just go and I bring it to him and I'm like, hey, Rob, sign this, will he sign it? Or will this fall under that umbrella of I won't be signing these for grading?
I think it's just a grading, because I saw in different places people asking them that if you just come to them and sign, because then it can't be authentic because you didn't have the witness. So right. I think he's fine with it. but I feel that this is a ploy for him to run an opportunity. Like, remember when he was saying, I'm done. I want nothing to do with these CGC labels. It's a crock. I want nothing. This is a sham. It's whatever he was saying, remember? Then all of a sudden he had this signing with like this private signing with CGC, and then the labels were okay, and it was okay to work with CGC again. They weren't amateurs. I think him by saying, I don't want to get these signed and graded, he thinks CGC is going to come to him. Well, how about we do a private, or we pay, or whatever they did last time? It's his way of doing this to make fake, like, people want it now. I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. Like, just like get momentum for doing another signing.
Trying to artificially inflate the market and want for these is what
yes, I didn't know how to put it. So
no, I knew where you were going. I was letting you roll with it there.
All right, hang there for a second. I got it.
I don't want to interrupt you. I'm not that kind of guy.
No, that's what I do. But yeah, so we'll see. I have a feeling within, because he even said, this is my date, the cutoff date that I'm doing this thing. But I find it funny because he's not doing any cons. So how could he get them for grading? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. So this is you were mentioning this. So this is from February of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Got off a call with CGC. They called me because apparently there has been some fervor over my decision not to participate with their new Deadpool label. In short, I let them know I am no longer working with CGC in any capacity. My advice is to not participate in that CGC label, as eventually there will be another and possibly another. And how many times are you going to keep paying to crack open your books? Caution.
Yeah. So I have a feeling we'll be getting one. Like I said, we'll be getting another message soon.
If I was to guess, I'm going to say that he would probably let it cool off for about 2 years to the 35th anniversary of the debut.
That's a good thing. I think he'll be sooner. He doesn't like to be out of the limelight. He doesn't like people clamoring for his signature, and it's all money. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, which I don't begrudge anybody for making your money, but if he could chisel a signature, then, by all means.
Again, I still think it's going to be 2 years from now. Like I said, get that last rush for these last 3 days to get everyone in. And then there's going to be that 35th anniversary special label that people are going to want to get for their New Mutants 98s, right?
Possibly.
Yeah. So there are conventions this weekend where the Rob will not be. He did announce that he was going to be at some convention later on this year, but we'll get there when we get there. But this weekend is the Washington State Summer Con in Puyallup, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Comic book folks there are going to be Ryan Otley, Jim Shooter, Frank Cho, Aaron Lopresti, Dan Jurgens, and Mark Bagley.
Right. Any media stars? On
the media guest side, we've got something for you and we got something for me.
Mm-hmm.
For me, we've got the Icon, and I'm not going to do the yell because it's late and we still got a lot of show to do, but it's Sting.
Oh.
Kabuki Crow?
Oh, I know him, and the bassist from the Police. Got it.
Yes, stop it. And then for you, MacGyver himself, Richard Dean Anderson. And this is the first time Richard Dean Anderson's name has popped up on a convention schedule in quite some time.
Right, because he usually does mostly sci-fi conventions.
Yes.
And or those, I think he did a couple of chillers maybe. But, I'm sad because I was the last that Richard Dean Anderson ever had on Twitter, or X as it's called now. But then they took you to see who liked what away, and now I have no proof of that anymore. So
you should have taken a screenshot of it.
I may have a screenshot of
it. Make sure you post it after the show.
If I can find it, I'll post it.
Or X it. Don't you don't you have individual folders of all the people that have, interacted with you and their dalliances online like I do?
Oh, I was before you were going to say I do, like for yourself. I was going to say, what do you take me for? Some kind of sociopath?
Again, I stand by my original statement. Yes.
Listen, I am a sociopath, but for different reasons.
Gotcha.
Like we there's like a Venn diagram of reasons why me and you are sociopaths, and we cross over in a little section.
I will say, as we do percentages here, of the folders and stuff that I have on people, only I would say less than 40% of it either currently is or could be called into state's evidence.
Okay. And I would, you know how like with the government you're allowed to petition to see your file on yourself. I don't know if you can do that.
No, I didn't.
I'm not. I know I saw it in an episode of Law and Order with
that's not real bad.
Belzer. He was on it. I want to petition you to see my file. I want to see what you're holding on me, Joe.
Nothing. I got nothing on you. I could tell. I'll tell you.
You really have no folder on me?
I got no. You behave.
I do, and I delete stuff before you could take the screen cap.
Well, you'd be surprised how quick I am.
Right.
No, like I said, outside of the picture of me and you with Salty Keith, that's it.
Right.
But that's in the folder that's labeled celebrities.
Ooh.
But just be careful what you're doing out there, is all I'm saying.
Yep.
Because there's people that are much worse than me.
Oh.
So the link to the convention will be in the show notes with this episode, along with information about the soon-to-be-named network at soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. I think soon-to-be-named-network.com is dead. I haven't heard back from Jeremy in 2 weeks on it, and I've emailed him twice in those 2 weeks, and he's not replying to me. So let's say it's dead. But anytime any of the shows in the soon-to-be-named network go live, of course, you could find them at their own individual sites. You could find them through the podcatcher of your choice. But if you want them all together in one-stop shop, that is soon-to-be-named-network.tumblr.com. And that, of course, includes this show that you're listening to now, Longbox Heroes, Longbox Heroes After Dark, Final Wrestling Place, At Odds with Wrestling, We Need Wrestling, Puzzle Warriors 3, Profane Arguments, Wings on Wings, Porch Talk, and again, I'm not going to... If Ed is on the stink sheet for the third week in a row, I'm going to officially co-op the stink sheet as part of one of our things.
Okay.
But we'll see. Also, you can find out what our friends in and around the internet are up to, starting and including with a friend of the show, Mike Sterling, his blog over at progressiveruin.com. Our friend Kevin at his blog over at hellionsteam.com. Still just the redos or write-ups of the homeworks for the At Odds show. I think I might have to mention that on that show. I don't know if he listens to this show. Anyway, you can go buy Jason Sandberg's Jupiter from his Indiegogo page, which is linked up here. You can go buy Chris Runt's Battle Monsters, which is linked up digitally through his site, fortressofcomicnews.com. You can go check out our friend Davey of the band Cave People, his self-published comics through cavedomaincomics.com. You can go check out Rick Williams' The Chop Shop at freekaratechops.storeenvy.com. My tongue is all over the place today. Where he has a bunch of they look like the old school muscle figures, but they're not quite the old school muscle figures. His own original creations, people like Ivan the Snake Man, the Collector, the Masked Devil, Ballotard, and you can get them as the replica muscle resin figures. You can get them as pins, you can get them as stickers. He does a whole bunch of really cool original art stuff there, inspired by those old school muscle designs. And of course, our comic book store. If you do not have a comic book store in your area, or you do not have a good comic book store in your area, reach out to the good folks over at Comics on the Green. I have the Facebook page linked up here. Anytime the new books come in, if the books are going to be late, and I say it every week, if the books are going to be late. The books have not been late like entirely late in quite some time.
Right, because of like a weird holiday or a snowstorm.
Right, not even a holiday or snowstorm they've been late, because holidays, to let you in on the secret, they'll ship the books a week in advance for a holiday.
Right, because we remember back in the day when the books, before the preview like day for comics, and then the weird stuff that they do, sometimes they ship them a week early. If it was a Monday holiday, the books wouldn't show up until Thursday all the time. And now it just seems like, they get a good head start on. It's like a week early for holidays. Like, I think the only weird thing may be snowstorms from here on out. But I'm knocking on wood, we've been lucky on the East Coast. So
yes, we've had some pretty severe thunderstorms over the last several years, but nothing enough to not have the comics not show up. But if they're not going to show up, Dave and the crew will let you know on the Facebook page. Go sign up for their mail order subscription service. Get your books mailed to you weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or just order something from their online store. And if you do, there's a chance you can get a sketch on the package from our good friend Beckie, who we're going to turn things over to right now for My Walk Down Lois Lane.
Welcome back to My Walk Down Lois Lane, the third highest selling comic of 1965. Let's talk about an issue from 1965. This story is for Bullpup Calder from the Longbox Heroes Discord, who reminded me that there are Super Baby issues of Lois. You might want this one, dude. It is issue number 57, and it has Lois and Lana trying to spank Superboy on the cover, so let's dive in. It starts off with Superman dropping Lois and Lana off at a hotel for an assignment. He tells the girls he's off to do some youth-generating experiments for a week, but should be back to normal for the Daily Planet party on the 19th. As he leaves, both girls make comments about hating to see him go but love watching him walk away. After the assignment, Lois spots a baby smashing dumpsters in an alley. She goes over and realizes it's Superman as a toddler, so the experiments probably went wrong and he instinctively just flew to her. He says, "Please take me home, pretty lady." She says, "Of course I will, super darling. Please call me Auntie Lois." And as they fly off, Lana spots them, and Lois tells Lana she'll meet her at her apartment. Lois explains to Lana that Superman will probably return to normal by the 19th, but until then it's up to her to babysit him, with Lana saying, "No, it's up to us to babysit him," while cuddling Superman and saying she hopes he acts this way when he becomes a full-grown man again. This is where the issue starts to get real weird. Lois hatches a scheme and asks Lana to watch him for a while she returns to her own apartment, where she hangs up multiple pictures of her and Superman. Lois has decided she's going to use psychology to influence Super Baby so that when he is a grown man again, he'll believe that they are an item. When she brings him back to her apartment and tries to trick him, the Super Baby grabs the pictures and rips up the side of Lois, which is really funny because this baby is not being taken for a fool. Lana walks in as Lois is trying to spank the baby, with her just hurting her own hand, and Lana tells her, "Yeah, the same thing happened to this broken tennis racket that I tried to spank the baby with for the same thing." The girls park the baby in front of a TV and see a show about post-hypnotic suggestion and small children. So each of them hatch a plan to hypnotize the baby using fans, spinning tops, cakes, and ice cream, and they spend the rest of the week trying to one-up each other to trick Super Baby in confessing his love so he will propose to them. The party finally arrives, and both girls run at a now adult Superman and begin yelling at him that he is supposed to propose to them at 8 o'clock. He asks them, "What the heck are you guys talking about? I have been in my fortress of solitude for a week. My youth restoring machine blew up, and I couldn't even do the experiments." He was never a Super Baby, which then freaks the girls out because who were they taking care of for a week? Superman takes them to his Fortress of Solitude and looks through some of his totally futuristic and high-tech machines to see that the Super Baby is from a parallel world. That Superman was trying the same experiments, but it worked, and he accidentally ended up in their world. When the experiment ended, he returned home as he changed back into an adult and then proposed to Lois and Lana because their week-long post-hypnotic suggestion actually worked. And the story ends with Superman saying that since bigamy is legal in that parallel world, Superman can marry both girls, but he's not going to marry them, so all of their scheming and cunning for a week was for nothing. Okay, so I know I mentioned at the beginning of this episode that Lois Lane was the third highest selling comic of 1965. It sold over 500,000 copies, and that year was in a top 5 along with Superman, Superboy, Jimmy Olsen, and Action Comics. The Superman family dominated 60s comics, and I believe it was because of stories like this. Something else I noticed, too, is that when you check these top 5, top 10s, top 50s, whatever, Lois and Jimmy are always within about 2,000 copies of each other. So if Lois sold like 525,000, Jimmy sold either 523 or 527, which I find really interesting. People just could not get enough of Superman. Tune in next week and we'll go back to some more Lois.
Thank you very much, Becky. Always informative, and I love the tease of the sales figures.
Mm-hmm.
She mentioned there, of course, that in 1965, the top 5 selling comic books for the year were all Superman books,
right.
Superman family books. And, Marvel has already been in existence for that at that point for 3 years, 2.5, 3 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think 63 was the first Fantastic Four book.
Right. And so official Marvel books, not counting Amazing Adult Fantasy and
anything Timely did,
Yeah. But it's still crazy that by this point, the way that we're led to remember these things is like, oh, Fantastic Four and Spider-Man were instant successes and knocked the world, on its side. And I do know Spider-Man is in the top 10. In this era, but to see the top 5 be all Superman family books, here we are now, 60 years later, 61 years later, 60 years later, whatever it is, that's still a pretty crazy fact,
Yeah, I mean, we've discussed this before, that I always found, like, we kind of looked at, and other people have said, it's not like it's our own original idea, that DC was a Superman company. That was their guy until like the late 70s, 80s, when you had that Neil Adams show up on Batman, The Brave and the Bold, and then, obviously you go into Dark Knight Returns and all that stuff, and that's when DC became a Batman company. Like the turn happens in late 70s, early 80s.
Yep.
And it makes me sad, but because I'll always be a Superman guy at heart. But yeah, it does blow my mind to think 1965, like Superman, like just ruling DC.
Ruling comics, period.
Yeah.
And like I said, Becky does get into a little bit more sales talk in the next couple of weeks, and I love the old school sales talks, like the history of.
And I'll tell you, I like it too because you had firm numbers to work with.
Yeah.
It's not like these are ambiguous numbers and these numbers over here don't count. Like I always say, I miss the days that it was just we just print these and mail them to your house,
Yeah. So let's get into what we read from this past week. Todd, where would you like to begin?
I'm going to start with what I was looking forward to most, Outsiders 8, and I fooled you last week. So it's written by Jackson Lansing and Colin Kelly with art by Robert Carey. The book starts out with a showdown between Batwoman and Ginny Hex, and Ginny's like giving her the warning shot kind of a deal, and she's like, she's come here and she's like, why are we even here? This town has been evacuated. Like there's nobody living here. And she's like, listen, you want to know why? Turn around. And Batwoman turns around and there's a ghost there, gives her a slap kind of a deal. And Ginny starts just like taking out the ghosts. And even Batwoman's like, I can help a little bit. I for reasons that maybe I've dated some, undead things, the vampire and whatnot. She's like, you use salt, so they're kind of helping. And I like when they kind of get a quiet moment together from the ghosts. She's like, aren't you Virginia Hex? And she's like, it's Ginny. Call me Ginny. Only narcs use a full name. And I thought that was funny. She's like, what are you doing here? And this is the part of the book where she goes into where Batwoman's like, I got called by Jenny, this character, who's one of the Sentry babies, like from Stormwatch and all that stuff that we do. And at this point, Joe, I've checked out on the explanation of why Batwoman is coming to see her, like, because she kind of explains it. And I'm like, I don't know what any of this is about. And when they get back, I do love that when they get back to her explaining it, Ginny just straight up goes, I don't understand any of that. Like, let's move on. And I'm like, ooh, as a Jonah Hex fan, I'm down with that. So they're trying to figure out their experience, like what they're going to do. And a ghost shows up and actually knocks on the door. And you're like, ooh, who would do that? And it's Jonah. It's her great, how many greats are in their grandfather. And they end up sitting down having a conversation. And he explains, which I like this part, is it's a 3-page just prose thing with some quick art, which I absolutely love. And he explains being on the run from this group of people and finding this gun when he was out of bullets, and he ends up killing them all. And it's kind of like a Saint of Killer's gun, where it never runs out of bullets and it always hits its mark, but it seems to be like kind of collecting the souls or whatever. And he knew that something was bad was going to happen with this gun, so he had to kind of throw it away. And he managed to give it up, and he put it in the chest that he gave Ginny, and he's sad that she kind of grabbed it, and she ends up explaining like how she grabbed it. And I like the bit. He was like, because somebody broke into my house at night, and I grabbed the first thing I could think of, and it was that gun. And when he opened the door in the bedroom, I answered him like a hex. That's my favorite line in this book. That's just such a great line. And he proceeds to say, I'm sorry, like, you're kind of stuck with that now. It's going to be hard to give up. And maybe Batwoman ends up kind of helping her with that, and we'll see where it goes from that. But I think this is the last of Ginny, so I'm checking out on this. But the 3 pages and the Ginny interaction, I would love to see a Ginny book with these writers and Jonah Hex as her mentor as the ghost. I would read the heck out of it, Joe. Mm-hmm. But the rest of the stuff that's going on with Outsiders, I could not care about.
Yeah, so Lansing and Kelly, they were big Marvel guys just like 3-4 years ago, maybe.
Right, they just finished the Guardians of the Galaxy, or they might still be doing it. I don't know.
Right, and I tried that Guardians of the Galaxy book, and it didn't really do anything for me. So, obviously I read this. I try to read what you're reading, and I like those 3 Jonah Hex pages of the prose stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel so much of this book doesn't work for somebody who's just jumping in on issue 8, because this is not them introducing Ginny, Jonah Hex into the Outsiders. And from the feel of this, I think they're going more of a Wildstorm Authority vibe as opposed to like Batman and the Outsiders vibe.
Right. When I said Stormwatch, I should have said Authority, but go ahead.
Yeah, but again, same difference. 6 of one, half a dozen the other. When it comes to that sort of thing. And I'm sure, like, if that's what you were looking for out of this book, then maybe, like, this Ginny Hex, Jonah Hex might have felt out of place to you.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously DC has Lansing and Kelly, pinned or pegged or earmarked or whatever verbiage you want to use for like big upcoming things if they're allowed to kind of like lay the groundwork for this here, especially since the Authority or those sort of related things are going to have such a big part in the upcoming Jimmy Pistol DC movie universe. But those 3 pages made me want to read more Jonah Hex and not so much Outsiders.
Fair enough. Same here.
Yeah. So the book I was most looking forward to coming out this week was from Mad Cave Studios, Dick Tracy #2, written by Alex Segura and Michael Morrissey, and art by Gerardo Borges. So it is on track going forward as a regular monthly ongoing. I know we read this early at the end of February. Mm-hmm. Then it came out, I think, in April. And then there was no issue in May, but at least looking at the solicitations from now until what we have in September, it is on a monthly schedule. So I'm very happy there.
Right.
It just feels as though it's been such a long time since we read issue 1 and issue 2. I had to go back and reread issue 1 to kind of refamiliarize myself with a lot of this stuff that I would be worried about.
Right.
The majority of this issue, though, deals with Dick Tracy and Tess, but it deals more so with introducing us, the reader, to Pat Patton, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who is somebody who was in the war with Dick Tracy and a lot of the other characters that we're going to meet here. Excuse me. And he is investigating his brother who went missing, looking for a job at the docks. And by looking into what his brother is up to, of course, he runs afoul of some of the great Dick Tracy characters that we've seen in the past, whether it be Mumbles, whether it be Prune Face, whether it be, Lips Manless, whomever it is. But they're doing a good job of tying all this stuff in together, putting these characters in place to get them to where we know, not retelling the origins, which I can only imagine either didn't exist or were flimsy back in like the weekly paper strip days, right?
Yeah, you didn't have much time to lay down a story in 3 panels.
Yeah, and to add a little bit more of modern storytelling where, you're talking about a character, whether it be Patton or whether it be even Dick Tracy to an extent, where these are guys that came home from World War II, which, again, the timing of this just feels odd. I feel as though they say in the book that it was World War II, but just the look and the feel of the book, I know they're trying to modernize it just a bit. I think it would have worked better for the aesthetic of the book that they said it was World War I. But again, I get it. I'm not the storyteller here. I'm just the reader of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But we're 2 issues in, and already like big name people, like people that you might know, with your only touchstone to Dick Tracy is the classic film from 1990 that just had its anniversary this past weekend. Like, major characters from the movie are being killed off left and right 2 issues in.
Right.
So it's like big stakes, it's high stakes. It's how we're getting Dick Tracy over. We're getting him and Pat together as a team, with the assist from Tess, kind of, being a little bit more clever for a broad or a dame or whatever you would call a woman back during this time in the 40s. But I like this book. It's not Gotham Central, and I would never say that it is, but they are working very hard to make a Dick Tracy comic work on its own, that they're taking this property and doing something interesting with it. But I would assume and I would hope, to the people that are much older than me that like Dick Tracy, that it's still staying true to the folks who like that Dick Tracy as well.
Right. What I'll say is I don't think they ever did origins for a lot of the characters. They were just what they were, their gimmicks, and that was it. You know what I mean? But if somebody was who was a true like Dick Tracy comic fan from back then, like told me different, I wouldn't argue it. But reading this issue, I'm with you. I like the fact that they're trying to do, a crime book with it. And, well, that's obviously what it is, but with his rogues gallery, if you will. The only thing I didn't like about this book is, because I enjoy it, is that they started off with Mumbles. And Mumbles he's like in this issue. And even when I watch the movie and you can't understand him, and they kind of hint at there's a way to understand him in this book.
Yeah.
But if there's anything I like less than writing an accent, if that makes sense, is
yes.
writing someone I can't understand. And I get it. I know what the character's gimmick is and what they're doing here. But it was kind of like, we're going to maybe tell you because we recorded them. We figured out the cadence or whatever it is. And I'm like, okay, but them saying, like, when Prune Face shows up, the one guy, Pat, shows up and he goes, I know how you got those scars. So it makes me feel that we're going to get origins for these, which I'm fine with.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to know. That would be more interesting. And we'll see. And I was shocked, too, that they were willing to off people.
Yeah.
That, and I was like, okay, so now as a villain in his book, nobody's safe. You know what I mean? So it makes it a little more interesting. So,
yep.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'll keep going with it.
I'm with you, and not to defend it. A lot of times when they do put someone who has a different speech pattern, let's say, a lot of times they'll do the gimmick where it's being translated in the captions.
Yes, if they do that, then I just read the captions.
Right. But I think because of what happens in the book, they couldn't do that.
Because it's a reveal.
Yes, there had to be the reveal of them, our lead characters figuring it out. If we, the readers, figure it out before our lead characters do, I think that takes away a little bit of what they were trying to do. Right. I get you. It didn't bother me as much as it bothered you. Again, I'll make excuses for Dick Tracy all day.
Right. Fair enough.
So that's what we read this past week. Let's get into what we're looking forward to coming out this week. If you head over to longboxheroes.com every Tuesday around noon, we put up the pull post, which is a link to all the books that are coming out this week. Whether you get your books in print, whether you get them digitally, whether you get them sent to your home, however it is, you get your books. Be forewarned, be forearmed, know what's coming out this week. Todd and I attempt to guess what the other is most looking forward to coming out this week. Todd is currently in the lead over me with one correct guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at Todd's list, and I'm going to guess the book that he's most looking forward to coming out this week is Uncle $ Rouge and the Infinity Dime.
It is Uncle $ Rouge and the Infinity Dime. Is that the same book you're looking forward to?
It is.
And I will say, on the cover, it does have the money sign for the S.
I know. So, when you sent it to me, you did have the money sign in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that the site codes the $ as part of a word,
right?
It wasn't it wasn't previewing correctly, so I had to change it to an S.
Okay, so I figured you would want me to send it the way it was. Knowing that now, I won't use any weird, symbols for the thing, even if it's in the title. You know what I mean?
Right.
So. And I said yours is the same one, right?
Yep.
We're all over the place. Okay.
Yep. Jason Aaron writing Uncle Scrooge. Let's go.
This is the first Uncle Scrooge book I've ever bought.
This is the first one that you didn't have to have foisted upon you?
No, I've never read a duck book.
Really?
Yeah, all I've ever read, I've watched the cartoon. I like DuckTales. Don Rosa, forgive me. But I've never read any of the Uncle Scrooge. That was never my bag.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, like I said, I'm the same way. My touchstone with Uncle Scrooge is the DuckTales cartoon and the DuckTales NES game.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Disney's A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, that might be. I remember watching that every year when I was a kid.
Yep.
What was that? I forget what this was called. Our World of Disney or whatever every Sunday.
The Magical World of Disney.
That's what it was every Sunday.
Back before Disney owned everything.
Yep. Well, I think Tubi's coming for him, Joe.
Oh, we didn't discuss that in the TV things. What was it that they had the records for the month of May, that the second most watched streaming channel of all of them, and there's a lot of them, was Tubi?
Good for them. Till all are one.
I'm very excited for that day to happen. I don't know if you saw the tweet we just got on the Longbox Heroes account.
I did not. I'll have to look.
All right. You look at that while I pitch to the next segment here, which is while you're on longboxheroes.com, of course, you could check out past episodes of this show, past episodes of Longbox Heroes After Dark, and also follow along with us for Todd and Joe Have Issues as we are rereading all of Gail Simone's Secret Six. This week we are talking about issue 8. And before we fully dive into that, to give Todd some more time, up on the DC Comics website, on their blog, there was actually an editorial that just went up today from writer Jules Chin Green, not only talking about queer representation in comic books, not only talking about Gail Simone's Secret Six, but kind of specifically about this issue.
Right.
So, the kismet of it all, and obviously, it is a very trend-setting storyline. It was one of our favorites when we first read it, when it first came out, all the way back then. But, kudos to DC for devoting so much to this. The article is really good. Kind of discussing, like I said, LGBTQ plus representation, queer representation in comic books, and how Gale was kind of a trailblazer, specifically with Scandal, and specifically picking things back up with Lilia, who gets reintroduced here in issue 8 that we're going to be talking about this week.
Right. And I'll just say really quick, I almost swore when I read that tweet. But yeah, I think that's a great article, blog or whatever. I think that's really cool, and I think Gale should get a lot of credit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously I'm sure it's, in conjunction with the omnibus coming out this week and a lot of other stuff. But again, that's the cynical side of me coming through. But definitely, like I said, if you're not listening to us, if you're not listening to Gale herself, definitely read that article if you were on the fence about it,
Right. Yeah. And before we get into this issue, I would like to say, because it starts on the first panel, that they have one of your favorite things in comics, Joe, where they have a Valstar Superstore. And should I add that to my list of things? Because it's not like a Walmart. Would that count? Because I'm trying to figure out what Valstar. Could it be All Star? I don't know what it's.
So it's definitely supposed to be a Walmart pastiche, right?
Right.
But it's not like as lazily on the nose as if they just like called it like Valmart or Star Mart or something, right?
Right. Or Wall Market.
Yeah, or something.
Mm-hmm.
Now, conversely, this issue does take place in Vermont. And I know what they call soft serve ice cream in Vermont. Cool. So maybe that is what Walmart is actually called in Vermont. I don't know. I don't know.
Because I have the list here, and I have Insta Slam, Nick Knock, Blister, which I don't remember which one Blister was.
I don't remember what Blister is either.
Right. Face Base, Please Pay Me, and the old Standby Chacos, Joe. So do I add Valstar to the list, or do we let it go?
No.
Okay, we'll not go on the list.
So anyway, Scandal is making a run to the store. I know he gets named a little bit later on in the issue, but she has one of Jeanette's servants go with her.
Mm-hmm.
And while she's at the store, one of the things that she has on the list of things to buy is a dozen sturdy dog collars.
Right.
Now, I don't know if now in this issue, we don't get to see what those are for.
Mm-hmm.
But one would assume that those were put on the list. I would assume by Ragdoll at the very least, right?
You never know. Jeanette might have wanted them too.
Yes.
There was something back when she was running the casino.
Yes. And this is when we are reintroduced to Lilia, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She was the young lady who jumped out of Scandal's birthday cake dressed as Knockout. And as they are starting to reconnect, obviously, and again, it's Liana, Linaa. I apologize. Mispronouncing that. So as she and Scandal are getting reintroduced, and Scandal is like, oh, this is, my servant, and the shape that she's in and everything else like that, Jeanette keeps asking her, are you sure you're not a dancer like she was?
Mm-hmm.
So Scandal is still kind of apprehensive, of course, because she still has feelings for Knockout, who she feels is her soulmate. Liana says, well, listen, I don't have a pen and paper to write things down on. I'm just going to write my name down here on this, gentleman's head who's with you. And then he has some, some words of advice for Scandal as they're leaving the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, hope is the heart of pain and only fear is eternal. But then he also recommends and suggests rutting in the dirt with strangers at every available opportunity. So again, whether or not his advice can be taken to heart is another story. So it ends up that Jeanette wants to take Deadshot, almost insists Deadshot go out on a date with her. Deadshot, not the cleanliest or most stylish guy. Catman hooks him up with some nice duds, and they end up double dating Jeanette and Deadshot with Scandal and Leanna. They end up going to a dance club in Vermont that's called Hyper Time, with lots of people at the club, whether it be patrons there or employees that are all cosplaying as DC characters.
Right.
And as they show up, there's some folks, by their own admission, white supremacists that recognize Deadshot, and they're going to make their move on Deadshot, but Jeanette made Deadshot promise no killing while they're out on the date tonight, and they attempt to attack him in the men's room. And he does not kill the guy, but he does severely beat him to a pulp. While that's going on, a gentleman dressed up as one of the Blackhawks tries to make a pass at Scandal, and that ends up in a big knockdown, drag-out brawl throughout the bar that they went to. Everyone gets to have their nice little moment. Deadshot ends up taking out the rest of the white supremacist gang. And lo and behold, they forgot that they had a stowaway in the trunk of their car. Now, before we get to that part, was there anything else you want to talk about from this episode? This issue?
No, this was fun. And Liana, that's what I call her. I don't know if that's right or not. But because I kind of remember, like, when she first appeared, I was like, yeah, she's going to get some run in this book. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to see her back. And I do like the bit where, doesn't she look in her eyes to kind of see, she's like, just shut up for a moment. Like if you're in there, let me know. And she's like, no, nothing. But then she kind of takes the advice, to make the try for it from Insignificus, which is a great name. Be a great punk band.
I couldn't remember his name. I apologize.
No, I found it as we were reading, so I thought that was really cool. And it was just cool that Jeanette made Scandal and Deadshot promised that they wouldn't kill anybody, but then Jeanette just starts tossing supremacists all over the place. She's like, I made you. I didn't promise. I just thought that was a great bit. And I don't care what anybody says. Deadshot's checkered jacket was awesome. He could have wore that and it would have been fine. But that's everything I have on the issue, other than the secret passenger in the trunk, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say the wearing the checkered jacket over his regular Deadshot gear is the move.
Right. He was just showing everybody what it was. He was like, yeah. And he even said, can you believe it was on sale?
I believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So the end story of this is just a little 3-pager as Ragdoll attempts to stow away on the date, but doesn't let anyone know that he has. And he's locked in the trunk of the car for 3 days. And during that time, he hallucinates a Tiny Titans-style adventure for himself, where he is the main character of the DC universe.
Joe, you call it Tiny Titans adventure. I call it Little Secret Six. I would read the heck out of a Little Secret Six book.
And again, my memory is hazy on this sort of thing, but I think we do come to this at least 1 or 2 more times.
Mm-hmm.
It's not drawn by Art and Franco, but there's a bit where he shows up in his Speed Racer race car bed, and the rest of the team says, "Oh yeah, Ragdoll," very much in the "Oh yeah, Titans" style of the Tiny Titans Art and Franco stuff at that time. But listen, Ragdoll is surprisingly, he's himself, but he's also surprisingly coherent and correct in his dreamlike state, where he tells Batman, "Your town stinks. You should move. It's full of weirdos." When he's hanging out with the Titans, he says, "I bet none of you are legal."
Mm-hmm.
When he does the bit with Amanda Waller about the Suicide Squad, that's a good bit too.
Mm-hmm. I like his oath for the Green Lantern Corps. From flowing locks to shapely end, no one's cute as Ragdoll friend. And if you're bad, I'd recommend Beware My Power, Ragdoll's bend. I'm like, yeah, all of this. I'll take it all, Joe.
Yeah. And again, I this is definitely something that coulda, woulda, shoulda been like a 1 or a 2 pager, maybe every couple issues or so. And I don't remember it might end up being, but it was a nice little break. It was a nice peek into the mind of Ragdoll, food and air and water deprived for 3 days of what he sees himself as in his place in the DC universe.
Right.
So that's it. This is a fun issue, kind of like just a bridge between, the big storyline that we had last time and what we're going to get next time in issue 9.
Right. It's like somebody once said, I love these down issues, and I always call them the X-Men softball issues. You know what I mean? It's like, we just went toe-to-toe with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants for 5 issues. So the 6th issue is us playing mutant softball. And I'm like, I can deal with that.
Right. And next week, we'll be talking, as mentioned, about issue 9, which is another break issue. It's, it is Secret 6, but it's part of the Battle for the Cowl series. Remember Battle for the Cowl, Todd?
Yes. As long as it's not one certain cowl, I'm good.
Yes. I don't think he was included. It was like, we're going to offer Batman's mantle to literally everyone in the DC universe. Not you. You already had it once and you ruined it. Never again.
Yep. You don't get to put the stink on it again.
Exactly. We're still trying to watch this. There's stink lines on it already still. Anyway.
Right.
So while you're over at Longbox Heroes, of course, we have shirts and pins and stickers. Reach out to me. I'll sell you some. I'll give you some. Tell me, I'll get you them. Do something. If you want more in creative designs inspired by this show, inspired by After Dark, inspired by the soon-to-be-named network itself, by At Odds with Wrestling, by a bunch of the other shows in the network, definitely go to our TeePublic store. The sale is still going on for another 2 days as you're listening to this. 35% off, and you can get those designs on everything from decorative throws to cell phone covers to hats. They have 2 different types of baseball hats that you can get designs on now too, Todd.
Oh, good. I was worried.
Yes. You could also make any and all of your purchases through our eBay affiliate link. This page contains affiliate links for eBay. We may receive a small commission on purchases that you make. You could use the affiliate link anytime you want to buy anything on eBay and support us at the same time.
Yeah.
The best way, however, to support us is to sign up for our Patreon. As little as $1 a month is going to get you 2 bonus shows from Todd and myself. One being Previewing the Past, where we look at 30 years ago this month's previews catalog. As Todd mentioned before, 1994. Is it the year of the ash can? We will see. I don't know. It might be. And then, of course, the other show would be Comic Book Oddities, where we look at some of the lesser known, much more maligned, forgotten, rightfully so, perhaps. I almost got one to push on you this week, but it was too tenuous of a premise.
Okay.
And it was a little bit difficult to find on any streaming sites. And I know that you would say a movie that stars, name above the title, not only Eric Roberts, not only James Earl Jones, but also Stan Lee, where Eric Roberts stars as a Marvel Comics studio artist, where he fights a haunted ambulance.
Okay.
It wasn't a comic book enough. There was no comic book based on it, even though it takes place in the world of comics.
Oh, well, they should have did an adaptation. That would have made it fair game. Right.
If you're aware of the adaptation of the 1990 Eric Roberts film, The Ambulance, let me know so we can add it to the wheel. $5 a month is going to get you those 2 shows 2 weeks before everyone else. It's also going to get you After Dark 2 days before everyone else, so you can listen to the shows in the correct listening order. Also, any level, you're going to get the full scans, high quality, expertly done of those previews catalogs that we talk about every month over on Previewing the Past, all over on the Patreon at patreon.com/longboxheroes.
Yes.
Before we get into TV talk,
Okay.
Is there anything else I forgot?
I can't think of anything. I think you covered everything, Joe.
All right, good. So we are going to start, you had said, with Star Wars. Is that correct?
Right. The Acolyte.
Yes, Star Wars The Acolyte, Episode 3. And again, the way the layout here is on old IMDb, I apologize. The episode entitled Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
So this episode is the origin of how Osha and May came to be who they are.
Yep, they're on space thermoscare. I mean, Brendock.
So I don't get too involved in a lot of this stuff online, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have good filters. I see people talking about it, addressing it, but I don't see the actual discussion or discourse that causes the fervor.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently, people are very upset with the way that the Force was handled in this episode. And people were citing maybe that you just can't change the Force and how the Force works however many years into the existence of the Force.
Right.
Because the main crux of this is May and Osha's parents, Mother Coral and Anastasia. They are Osha and May's mothers. They are part of a group that definitely seem to be Jedi. Maybe a little bit more on the dark side of things. They refer more so to the Force as the thread.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, Obi-Wan in the very first Star Wars movie in 1977 kind of refers to the Force as just that. It's the thing that kind of ties all living things together. They refer to themselves as witches. And later on this night, they are going to have the ceremony where May and Osha are going to graduate to become witches. And it appears as though May is all for it, but Osha kind of wants to do her own thing.
Yep. And
she wants, you know, she doesn't want to be tied to being a witch. She doesn't want to be tied to the same thing as her twin sister does. And while they are on this planet, there are Jedi, specifically Master Soul, who we were introduced to previously. He's kind of snooping around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when the moment... Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, I'd like to say that we find out very early on that, Osha is very wishy-washy and maybe not as good with the Force. And May is a sociopath right from the start. And she's kind of stronger and she wants to be all in with the Force. Because right at the beginning, they show the tree where May says, I'll always find you, Osha. No matter where you go, I know you always show up back here. And Osha's playing with like a space butterfly, and it looks like May starts to, like, I jokingly call it the Force choke of the butterfly, and Osha's like, stop. And you immediately get the idea of, all right, we've just established what these two characters are. And I kind of liked it a lot in the first, 10 seconds. And I just feel maybe there's something off about May, Joe, but we'll get there.
For sure. So the Jedi show up and they kind of make the offer that, like, okay, these girls are Force sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Oh, okay, so we haven't even really gotten into what, and they kind of tiptoe around it because they come out and they say that Osha and May don't have a father.
Right.
And they insinuate that maybe Anastasia and Coral maybe tapped into the Force to create life.
Did the old Darth Plagueis shuffle?
Okay, thank you. Do we forget that's how Anakin Skywalker was conceived as well?
Right, and I'm not playing devil's advocate here, because that's the story we get told by Palpatine, basically. but like we never see it happen. So like if they were ever going to retcon it, I could see how they could do it. But that to me was always the origin. Lucas never backed away from it. It was always that kind of birth. And he said Darth Plagueis had the ability to make life and to keep people from dying. And people kind of got up in arms. I'm like, I don't know. This has been around in Star Wars for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
So
Osha makes the decision that she wants to go off with the Jedi.
Right.
May essentially says, I'm not going to let you. And to do so, I'm going to burn you alive.
Yep.
And if that means burning everyone on the planet and the planet itself down, so be it.
Okay, I'll say this. And one thing I do want to say is they did part of the ceremony, but it seemed like only May got whatever it was going to be, and they didn't have time to do it for Osha. So I think that's going to be a big part of something. And then saying that, where you go, she burned down the whole planet. I feel that we're seeing this from Osha's side, and we're going to replay this whole episode from May's side at some point. I don't think, because of the fact that Trinity from the Matrix or not that one, the guy who had the force bubble around him, he takes the poison willingly.
Yes.
Because I feel something happened that we're not seeing, or there's it's trickery or whatever. And that's why they were wronged in what May's not the total sociopath that we're making it out to be. And I don't think she killed the family, if that makes any sense.
So you think they're going to rush them on it? We're like, here's this episode, which is Osha's point of view. Here's this episode, which is May's point of view. And then here's this episode where it's a third, party's view. And then like the truth is somewhere in between all three stories. That
could happen, but I feel May's version is going to be the more realistic version. Do you know what I mean? Like one of those Jedi is actually like busted stuff up. You know what I mean? Did a bad thing. Or maybe it was this person who's running around with the red lights. Like, I don't know, but that could happen. It could be each side and then the truth or whatever. But we're gonna see a little more of it, because doesn't May get upset when she sees her family dead? Like because it doesn't look like they were burned. It looked like they were just killed somehow. Whether it was an explosion that rocked the I don't know, but we'll see. But she ends up going. Osha gets away and ends up leaving with the Jedi because she wanted to leave. And May's left. They think she died. She fell in the cliff, and she goes to the tree to look for Osha, and she's not there, which like upsets her because she figured she wouldn't abandon her. And that's the end of the episode. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I'm still interested. I like it. Don't love it.
I like it too. I'm with it so far. I think the mysterious, now that we've been introduced to her, I think the mysterious Jedi that is manipulating May is Mother Coral.
You think so?
Yeah.
A lot of Darth Maul stuff going on?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my guess.
Okay, we'll see.
So we are going to talk about The Boys next. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have it here in my notes that it was requested to talk about Doctor Who last, correct?
You want me to do Doctor Who now? I can.
No, I'm joking around. Come
All
on.
right.
So it's tough to talk about The Boys when they do the big 3-episode drop, right?
Right.
We can't like narratively go through like here's like beat by beat episode 1 and episode 2 and episode 3.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I do my best to avoid this sort of stuff online in regards to the discourse on these shows, especially if I haven't gotten a chance to watch stuff yet.
Right.
But I saw there was like a big thing that rolled out today that so far this is the least positively reviewed season of The Boys to date. It's certified rotten on Rotten Tomatoes.
Ugh.
And I disagree. It is definitely not rotten, but
it's not the best of the 3 seasons opening.
No. I can't quite put my finger on it, but it definitely feels as though for some reason the budget was a little bit less for this season than it was for the previous seasons. Like, there's a bit throughout the show where Mother's Milk every day is wearing a different like rap or R&B shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And they look like they're very poorly made shirts.
Okay.
Some of the special effects are a little bit more wonky than they have been in past. Now, there are scenes where I think they're supposed to be wonky, like when Frenchie and Kamiko go after the shiny light people and Frenchie's on drugs. Like, the special effects are supposed to look weird and off-putting there.
Because it's even like they're like bubbles. It's not supposed to look real at all.
But you know where the biggest loss from the special effects budget is?
What?
How come Homelander's cape don't move the way it used to?
I don't know, Joe. I will admit he did. I was watching some like cape work.
Yeah.
He did the cool thing where he sat down with it, and that was right. Mm-hmm. I feel they've taken they forgot to line the bottom hem with the weight so it sways when he walks.
Yeah.
I honestly think that's the magic to it. And if I ever his name is Anthony Starr, right?
Anthony, yes.
Anthony Starr. If he's ever at a con and they're taking questions, I'm doing a solid 15 on cape stuff. I got to get to one of the cons that he's at, that he's doing a panel.
I want the Mark picture with him in the full Homelander costume with both of us holding a glass of milk.
Oh, I would. Oh, my God. The only picture I want more is Barry Bostwick in the Megaforce outfits. But other than that, that's
both you and he wearing the blue
headbands.
And both of you doing like the motion photo where you're both doing the thumb kiss.
And I'd even let you be in that one too if you wanted, Joe. You could be a part of our Megaforce.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll say this because I know what you're saying. I don't think the effects were as flimsy. I really don't. But what I think was and when I say, I'm not saying the first two episodes were bad in any stretch. I'm saying they are not as good as the opening episodes of the last three seasons. And on top of that, I think like everything that we get there are good stuff in all the episodes, but the first two episodes are stretched, I think, to get a story. But when we hit the third episode and go, I'm like, this is the boys that I'm used to, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, like, I really like it. I was talking. When you go to the shop this week, ask young Beckie about the way Kripke works out TV shows, because she's a big Kripke, like, she's got it all mapped out because he did Supernatural, and she's like, oh, it's always the first three seasons are really good, and then the fourth one is always weird. He goes off in like different directions for stuff. And I felt, as we'll get to it, we get to all these storylines, I feel like everything that's going on is a distraction for each member of the boys. And I feel it's almost designed like that, maybe by somebody who is super smart, who was ahead of the game before they joined the Seven.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense. I feel like everything going on with Huey's mom, with Frenchie and the person they're in love with, and I can't think, Kamiko with the terrorist group.
And MM with, he's now in charge of the boys, but then he has the stuff going on with being back together with the wife, and the daughters being rebellious, and then what ends up happening with the ex-husband.
Right, Todd, who they finally got something right about Todd's, that they have kind of an ability in them. I'll say that.
Energy, if you will.
A what?
A certain type of energy. They say in the show, a Pete Davidson energy. Is that what you're insinuating?
Like, I say a lot of times that they pick on people named Todd, but they got one right, Joe. And also Butcher with his son.
Yeah.
Everybody's distracted. And with the agency not wanting him and Mother's Milk not wanting him, and he goes to Negan and is like, or Negan comes to him and he's like, we got to figure this out and I got to kind of do it on my own. But I feel like these are all things to muck up the boys that were meant to happen, if that makes any sense.
Right, because, the main through line of all of this first 3 episodes that we get here, it's the backdrop of the trial of Homelander for killing the guy who threw the can at his son at the end of season 3, just kills him, cold blood, broad daylight, and people cheer. And now you have the 2 groups of people, of the Homelander people and the Starlight people, against each other. The verdict comes down that Homelander is not guilty of what he did. A fight starts, and that is insinuated by Sage, a.k.a. Sister Sage, a.k.a. the newest member of the 7. The person who is picked by Homelander because her superpower is she's the smartest person in the world.
The smartest woman? No, wait. The smartest person.
Smartest person in the world.
I love when she does that over and over again.
Right. Now, do you think that is her superpower? Or do you think she's hiding something?
No, her superpower is just being real smart.
Okay.
That's it. And I like the fact that the reason he brings her in is because he finds out that everybody around him are sycophants and yes men.
He just found that out now?
Yeah, yes.
Todd, I can't believe that it would take him into episode 1 of season 4 of this highly rated, highly watched show to understand what the plot of the show is.
Some people just don't get it, Joe. But he does his bit where he's like, all you people like A-Train and the Deep, and I can't think of what the name of the one woman is, who's like his Ashley, the administrator, who's great, by the way. I love Ashley. Is like you all say yes, and he goes to her, and she lays it out to him, Joe. She lays it out to him. She goes, "You're coming to me, even though you're not going to listen to me, and anything that I tell you to do, and she's like, well, that's why I want you, because you're not going to be a yes man." And it's funny because what she does is she says well, Homelander's like, "I'm going to be there for you for your first save to the kid." She goes, "You shouldn't be there because you want him to make him look strong. This is all the reasons." And Homelander's looking at him. Homelander doesn't listen to a word of it, Joe. And I'm like, she going in, she knows, she laid it all out. You can't stand to be told what to do. So why are you asking me? And everything she does, he throws it up. And then he's like, "You even put me in the 7. Like, I'm supposed to be working behind the scenes, and now my face is plastered all over the world." It's like, you can't do it. You can't help yourself, can you? And I'm like, interesting, Joe.
And, obviously Homelander's whole thing is, there's the part at the beginning where they're at Victoria's, the nomination thing that the boys are attempting to infiltrate.
Yep.
And he's there, and he's in the bathroom, and they shoot him purposely in a way to attempt to make him look older than he actually is. And when I first see that shot, I go, is he that much older, or is this a conscious decision? And then you see the jar that he's keeping of things.
The gray hairs.
Again, this is the boys, so we have to kind of tiptoe around stuff, right?
It's just gray hairs.
Just gray hairs. And, and obviously Sage is able to pick up that sort of stuff when he comes to see her. And that through line, of course, is, that he is part human, so he is going to age eventually, and you've got his replacement right there in the kid. And it certainly seems as though Sage's plan that they have is to set things up so that if and when Homelander goes, that everything will be set up for the kid. It doesn't seem like Homelander's ready to go just yet.
No. And he's not ready to let the kid be his own guy either. You know what I mean?
Right.
But on that, I want to ask your opinion on something, because when the Deep comes to see Sage.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about this.
And he walks in because she gives him the advice to stand up for himself, which makes him stand up to Ashley, which she was setting him up. And I think she's setting him up too. Everybody's getting set up by her. He goes to the room and she's eating trash food, blooming onion, watching like mind melting dumb TV, and she ends up making out with the Deep, whatever you want to say. And I feel she's not talking like herself, and then they pull away and they show a stick, a rod with blood on it. And I feel she lobotomizes herself to make herself stupid so she can relax / enjoy herself. Like, she's on tilt every second of the day, and this is her way of relaxing, and it's going to be her weakness. Somebody's going to figure it out, use it against her, and she won't be smart enough to stop anybody, if that makes any sense.
So you think that she lobotomized herself, and that's why I had asked you if she has like some sort of secondary power that she's not letting anyone know about, because we don't know if this is the first time that she's done this, and typically you don't bounce back from a lobotomy.
But to be fair, everybody that we've ever seen juiced up on V heals. They go back to normal.
Okay.
Like, they shot what's her face, the vice president, in the head, and she goes down and she heals and gets back up. So if you take that was a bullet through the brain pan, she's fine. So why wouldn't you, if you lobotomize yourself, just have it grow back?
Well, isn't Victoria's powers similar to that of Kamiko's, where Kamiko has like the superhuman strength and she's got the fighting skill and everything else like that, but she's effectively indestructible? Because like there's the part where they go to, and I forget what, TruthCon, which
yes,
I know that you said that they feel like they're stretching things out in episodes 1 and 2. I could have did a whole full episode just looking at the floor at TruthCon, trying to take in and read all the signs, right?
I was talking to that at the shop today with Beckie. I was like, I just want to go back and just pause every 2 seconds, but I would have never got through the episode.
Right. So, Kamiko gets shot in the face. In the opening scene, she gets her face cut off, and they do the bit where it's just like kind of hanging by a thread there, right? Mm-hmm. And she just puts it back on and everything's okay. So obviously, I don't think that you could go up to Sage and shoot her in the head or cut her face off and she could regenerate it in the same way that Kamiko can, or that Victoria can, or the daughter can, who has like the weird mutation, but she had the compound V injected into her after the fact, where we don't know if Sage did or did not. And that's a lot of times where the difference comes in the way that it affects people and everything else like that. But again, maybe you are correct. Maybe she self-lobotomized herself knowing that I could do this and I could just make myself stupid for X amount of hours and it'll just regenerate and grow back.
Right. It's like a little brain vacation.
Uh-huh. I always say that's where I stab myself in the brain with a Q-tip. And, that's where that memory was.
My problem was I stuffed 25 crayons up my nose and I sneezed and only 24 came out.
Oh, there you go.
Right? So... But my doctor always held up my x-ray with his thumb in the way.
What a coincidence.
Yep. But, okay, so that's my take on that. I do want to talk about Firecracker and Starlight for a second.
Sure.
Because my favorite bit is, to me now, everybody in the show, there was no good people, like truly good people, except for maybe Huey.
Yes.
And Starlight on the outside. You know what I mean? Like, everybody else has done horrible, horrible things, even Mother's Milk. But when we find out they bring Firecracker onto the 7, and she goes on her tirade about Starlight, and you find out why, because she ends up having a face-to-face with Starlight, and she tells us the rumors that she spread as a kid. Starlight just became a dirtbag to me. You know what I mean? Like, she says she's better than that, and she's changed. But I don't believe it, because she goes quickly back to the Starlight persona. So she's like, oh, I'm going to do it because it's good for my group, these people who are helping people. But I feel like anybody who's shot up with V is a bad person, Joe. And we're starting to see the cracks in Starlight.
And then the only other person that we haven't talked about was Black Noir, who was just replaced by a different actor.
Yes.
And he's having difficulties understanding his role.
Yes, and I feel like he's not long for this world.
Oh, and he's narcoleptic as well.
Yes, he's narcoleptic as well. Because I honestly thought, if you know the book, and I won't spoil anything for anybody, that this Black Noir was going to be what Black Noir was in the comic, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it, so I still think it's going to happen at some point. But that's just my take on it.
We mentioned the Deep. He's got the Octopus. He's still doing the press tour to kind of, try to put those rumors to rest.
Right. You know who the voice of that is, right?
No.
It's Tilda Swinton.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I don't believe A-Train's face turn. I still don't believe it.
Didn't they tease a face turn last season with him, too?
Yes, and they keep doing it. And I stand by anybody who's got Gen V in them is a dirtbag. And he's just angling something for himself. He's just angling something for himself.
And I will say this, I have to agree with you. I don't trust A-Train, but if there was a thing to push you over the edge, and that would be making a movie of your life where Will Ferrell is your mentor, I would want to flip sides too.
Okay, so Will Ferrell is playing the coach who mentored all the kids at Vought College, whatever it's called, in Gen V, the TV show. He ends up being killed very early. He's Clancy Brown, I think, in the first episode. And they kind of do that. And the other thing that you don't know about from Gen V is they are cooking up a disease that can kill soups. But they
mentioned that in passing.
Yes, they're like, but it's not strong enough to take Homelander down yet. Because what's-her-face, the vice president, kind of wants him out of the picture because she doesn't like him. And that's what she's brewing to do him in.
Right.
And the last thing I'll say about Butcher and the kid is he's going to drug the kid with his mom's famous cookies. And he doesn't end up doing it, where we get like a bit of a heart from Butcher. But I think the kid knows that Butcher drugged the cookies, because when he talks to when the kid comes over before they play foosball, he goes, "You're gonna die in 6 months. Are you afraid?" He's like, "Nah, I'm not afraid, mate." He's like, they talk a little bit later. He goes, "I know when you're lying," and he goes, "All right, I am afraid." And I'm thinking he means it. He knows when he's lying because of his superpowers. And then he goes, and they have a heart to heart, and he throws the cookies away. And the kid goes, "Why did you do that?" And he goes, "I put too much sugar in them." If the kid always knows when he's lying, he knows that he did something to those cookies, if that makes any sense. And I think that's going to be a plot point that, like, the kid's going to be like, oh, like they're going to kind of bond. He's like, you were going to do something to me with those cookies, weren't you? I can always tell when you're lying. And I think that's a little nod that's going to pop up later. But these are all my weird predictions. Sorry, Joe.
No, it's okay. I think the kid is still too naive. And, obviously you said Butcher had the heart. And, he tells Negan that it was because of like, oh, no, the kid was starting to open up and I could press him for more information. That's why I spared him. But obviously that's not the case. And I think the kid is starting to see, having Homelander as a dad isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Like the mirror he punched?
Oh, my goodness.
And the Vought on ice is one of my favorite things ever.
Yeah, that was a fun scene.
When it goes crazy and Jesus is pushing everybody out of the way.
Yeah. And what was the name of Firecracker's sidekick, Splinter?
Oh, yeah, which it took me forever to understand. Here, I'm going to confess a dumb moment.
All right.
Because he's just Madrox the Multiple Man.
Yes.
My brain immediately went to Splinter from the Turtle, and I couldn't figure out why he was called Splinter. I was like, why do they call him Splinter? Oh, he splinters into other people. Oh, okay. Joe, the episode was over. and I was eating a snack 2 days later, and it hit me like the same way that the Beatles are spelled with an E and an A, and it's like beet. They're not bugs. They're the Beatles. These are the things that my brain does sometimes. I think I gave myself a lobotomy, and it didn't heal, Joe.
It's still, your healing factor is slower than Sage's.
Yeah, my crayon's still in there.
But I enjoyed the first part of the season of The Boys, and it's one of those things where I didn't get a chance to watch it with April because, I was in a crunch. I had to watch it for the show. Mm-hmm. I would absolutely rewatch them again. These 3 episodes.
I would rewatch any of The Boys, like season 1, 2, 3, and now 4.
Yeah, so for sure.
Anything else on The Boys?
No, I think you have a lean 90 minutes to do on Doctor Who. I guess stuff happened.
Right. So you did watch the episode, right?
Okay. So I will say I watched the episode. April and I watched it together, so I could not take my extensive notes while I was watching it.
Right, which is fine.
So I'll chime in where I can, but I do want to just say that the 13-year-old super genius.
Oh, you mean Morris Gibbons?
Was very creepy.
He's my breakout character in this episode.
He gave off very strong Eric the Actor vibes. Ack.
I don't know what you're talking about, but I don't care.
Someone gets it.
Morris Gibbons. So basically, the Doctor shows up at Unit with the TARDIS and Ruby in tow, and he meets all the new people. Morris Gibbons, because remember he was the science advisor. There was the science advisor in the wheelchair in the specials. She couldn't make it because she had another part somewhere doing something. So They ended up adding Morris Gibbons, and we end up getting the new character Harriet, who's part of Unit, and they get there, and basically the Doctor ends up talking about the lady. She's like, we're here about this lady who keeps popping up, and he ends up showing all the pictures. And it's everybody we've seen and all the adventures we haven't seen, where she's been a Borg and a White Walker from a Game of Thrones. And I'm like, okay, that's funny. And they're like, okay, she's this person called Susan Triad who runs this company, and she's going to give out AI free to people later this day, and she has this big plan to kind of run it. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. And they kind of figure it out that it's like, oh, her name is Susan, and Triad is an anagram for TARDIS, so this is definitely her daughter. And they ended up putting a spy in there of Melanie Bush, which was one of his past companions. So she's there, and then we find out that remarkably this woman's very, very nice. So he's like, okay, we'll have to get into that. And Kate asks him, like, hey, can't you, recognize your own daughter just by looking at it? And he's like, listen, I'm going to explain regenerations. And he says it's a way to keep us alive, but it's also a way to hide us away. Like a couple of us have used it to hide away. And the bit that I love is like, okay, everything that's going on here, Morris Gibbons says it's a probability of a 95% that it's a trap. And the bit where he does it throughout the episode, where it goes up a point every time something weird happens, I was cracking up at. Till maybe the last one. We'll get there. So he's like, okay, so we have that weird, strange woman, but now we also want to help Unit find Ruby's mother, and he can't go back because he's already been there once. And he's time locked.
I want to interject. They do a good job because explaining time travel and explaining why you just can't time travel back to the moment of X and fix Y can get very hazy, can get very convoluted. And I feel as though on the show, in the context of everything, they did a very good job of explaining it in not an overtly complicated way.
Right. Well, a couple of reasons, because it's a very weird spot with like the snow and whatever's happening there. And the Doctor's not allowed to cross over his own timeline. If he goes that's what I always said. It's like a real easy way. Like if I'm the Doctor and I meet you and you're 20 years old and I go and I go away and I screw up coming back, and I come back and I meet you again at 30, I can never go back to 20 through 30, if that makes any sense. Right. It's like, I met you here. I'm on your timeline. I can't mess with this stuff. And that's the way. That's why when somebody dies in real life, they're like, they always acknowledge it in the show, like with characters you think you want back. And it's like, oh, I've been told he's dead. I can never see them again. And I'm like, that's kind of their out, which I always kind of like. So yeah, it's not too, like, they do a good job streamlining the explanation. So he's like, okay, well, you know, the one lady, Harriet, says, well, this is, you know, it was only this many years ago. It was 2004. It's not like you were in the medieval times. There's CCTV. And Ruby says, yes, there is a CCTV. And it was like there, and it was 66 meters away from where I was. Joe, do you know that that's 73 yards? Just so you know.
Oh, boy.
I found that interesting. I did the math. I did the conversion. So she's like, well, get the tape. Maybe we can punch it up because, you know, we have all this unit technology. She's like, all right, I'm going to go and get it. And she goes and gets it with Rose, which is Donna's daughter, is working for a unit now. And they go to the mother, and the mother's like, okay, I'll give you the tape, but I'm going back with you. Because if Rose's mother can work there too, why can't I show up? So she goes and gets Mrs. Flood to watch Ruby's grandmother. And in a great bit, like, they leave and she starts getting ominous, and she ends up talking straight to the camera at one point.
Like she did in her first appearance.
Right, like you've never seen a TARDIS before. But before she goes there, she's like, all right, I'll watch the grandmother because I don't do much. Because I basically am always hiding myself away, which is a line they wrote for her. And that reminds me of the regeneration. Like, it keep us alive. And, you know, sometimes we hide ourselves away. So I'm like, I'm starting to think Mrs. Flood is a Time Lord. So back, and she's like, a storm is coming because he waits no more, that was the hint of the big villain. He who waits. So we're back at unit, and Kate and the doctor are talking about her father, who was a classic character, who was in like more episodes or did with different doctors more than anybody else. And Joe, just for me, that teared me up to hear them talking about the doctor or the brigadier. Loved it. And then the doctor says, like, yeah, well, how come I've never heard of your granddaughter? He's like, I don't talk about her a lot. She goes, so you have kids out there? He's like, no, I have a granddaughter. But I'm a Time Lord. I don't have kids yet, which is a piece of information I've never had. It's like, so maybe he hasn't had his kids yet to have the granddaughter, but he met her. It's all very, very weird. He's like, all right, so we're going to use the tape, take it to the time window, which unit definitely doesn't have because they told them not to mess with it, but they have one. He gets to the time window, laughs at it, which I love because he thinks it's so like basic would be the word, Joe.
Right. Now, I want to just mention real quick. So we talked about Ruby and having the tape, the closed circuit TV camera of Ruby's mother abandoning her, right? And Ruby mentions that she and her adoptive mother watch the video every year.
Right.
Okay. That's all. I just wanted to make sure that we get that in there because I assume that should be important, maybe?
At some point, yes. Okay. They've definitely watched it. So he's like, okay, they're going to use the time thing to the tape to help focus the time window. And they end up going in and they watch the scene and they're trying to see the mother. And Joe, this is at the point where the episode from here to the end ramps up for me, if that makes any sense. Like the energy of it is, I'm fantastic. And he goes in, he's like, okay, this is me showing up, or like, this is us, and this is her dropping it off, walking away. It's like they're trying to look at her face and they can't find it. Then she walks past, like, really weird, so they can't get a good look, and she turns around, she points the TARDIS, like, because he comes out, and he's like, it's changing. It's not the way I kind of remember it. And he's like, well, where is she pointing? It's over there. And somebody else, one of the unit, like, I call them the unit red shirts, is in there. And he's like, she's pointing at either that building or maybe the lamppost, which I think there's something up with the lamppost because we keep seeing it. And he's like, maybe I'll go look. He goes behind the TARDIS, kind of disappears to look, and everything goes wacky, and they have to kind of get out of it because the time window kind of explodes, and that's when they realize that there's like a smoke monster in the timeline as they're re-going over stuff, and the guy who was there has died, and he's talking about like I'm not where I should be, I'm in hell, and like the beast is coming or something. I'm not sure like kind of what he says. He's like, okay, well, go over the tape again. I'm going to see Susan, and he ends up going to see Susan Triad, and he ends up talking to her, and she meets him, and he looks her in the eye. He said, if I look my granddaughter in the eye, I'll kind of know, and it's kind of weird. And they end up having a conversation where she's been having these weird dreams, and she's tired. And he asks her all the things that she's been, and she's like, I don't want to deal with this. She's freaked out and runs away. And he's like, okay, she remembers the dreams, so she's definitely remembering the stuff that we did. And they analyze the tape, and they realize that the smoke monster that kind of was there is now tethered to the TARDIS. And she's like, I watched the tape a million times, and we've never seen that before. So they evacuate all the non-essential personnel from the room. They keep Ruby, and the doctor says something's up with here. Send Ruby to the time window again. And Susan ends up giving her speech, and she kind of freaks out, and Harriet starts talking along like she's possessed, and Harriet lays out this great groundwork speech, and we kind of figure out that it's not Susan, that the whole bit was she was possessed by this creature, and Harriet, because Harriet's the Harriet Arbinger, the Harbinger, which wasn't a really good bit because they never told us her last name. So how can you figure it out if you don't know it?
Well, it's one of those things where the doctor's like, what's her name? What's her last name? Like, what's her full name? Mm-hmm. Like, he has to, like, be so direct to, like, ask for it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they give the speech, and she starts saying they were the many, like like kind of like the person that we met. I can't think of what, the singer, the maestro.
The maestro.
She ends up going down the list of, people that that have been around, and I do like the name. They're like the toy maker, the god of games, the trickster, the god of traps, which was seen in a spin-off show called the Sarah Jane Adventures. It's like the maestro, the god of music, reprobate, the god of spite, Mara, the god of beast, who was in a classic episode, the threefold deity of malice, mischief, and misery, the incenser, the god of disaster, and her children called doubt and dread. Joe, did they just bring in the Endless to Doctor Who? It sounds like these are all the aspects of certain things, if that makes any sense.
It's certainly, I think it's too many people.
Right.
Then the 7 Endless, but it's pretty close.
Right. And then she starts talking, he's like, and the daddy and mother of them all, the one of death, and that's Sutek. And they end up changing the triad and Susan technology, and it was all triangles, and triad's a 3-sided thing, and he's basically a character from the past from an episode called The Pyramids of Mars, who was kind of the god of death in the Egyptian thing. And Joe, I don't know if it worked for you, but me, when they did, it was Sutek and that wasn't Susan, and I was like, I just got Del Rusked again, and I hate it, Joe. When I get Del Rusked, I get very mad. But
no, I not having that vast knowledge of Doctor Who stuff, I didn't pick up the subtleties of all that going on.
Right. But the cool thing is the guy who's doing the voice for Sutek is 90 years old, and he was the voice in the original episode in the 70s. So I find that fantastic. And they have a beef. They have a definite beef because I love the Pyramids of Mars episode, and it was on the short list of Fourth Doctor stories for you when we were doing Who versus Woo. Because it's that good. Like, still think, like, you know how you liked the Talons of Wen Chiang because it was like goofy? Well, this was actually like a gothic horror story that was actually really, really good. And I was like, I think you'll like the goofiness of Talons more, but one of my like top favorite classic episodes. Only one appearance though he ever made. Did you like the episode?
Yes, I did. I will say, watching this with April, and this, everything is kind of building to that moment, and you get that bit at the end where it says "to be continued." Mm-hmm. My wife may have flipped off the TV
because she hates when they do that to you.
Yes.
Oh, so good. It was Joe. This was like everything that I wanted. Again, it gave me nostalgia and a new story and new characters, and like. The mad bassist texts me. He's like, I'm glad they brought Deadites to Doctor Who, he said. I was like, let me show you a picture of what a Deadite looked in the 70s. They just had pale makeup and sunken eye makeup, and that was it. So,
but again, they did a good job of tying in, like, what was this, episode 6 of this season so far?
It's technically episode 7, because
right.
Because the first special turned out to be episode 1, and it's going to be 8 this season.
Okay. So they do a good job of tying in all of that stuff that had been building up over all of these episodes into revealing who the big threat behind everything is and making that threat seem like a big deal. So, it certainly accomplished its goal. Right. And yeah, I may have forgotten that it was only 8 episodes this season, but so next week is the last episode?
Yeah, and I'm glad, because I was wondering if it was going to hit for anybody other than me, because I'm the only classic watcher. Do you know what I mean? And right. I'm pretty much going to ask Adam when I see him too. I'm like, did you like the episode at least? But yeah, next week is it, and then that'll be it again, I think, until Christmas.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that was enough show, I would say.
More than enough, I would say.
More than enough. So thanks, everyone, for listening. This was episode 715 of Longbox Heroes. For Todd, this is Joe saying we'll see you all here next week.
Remember, be a faucet, not a drain.
You're listening to the soon-to-be-named network, the Lamborghini of podcast networks.
The Rob is a Longbox hero. The Rob is a Longbox hero. He gives us five stars.